Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Inaugural Debut Revue, a new online reading series dedicated to promoting and celebrating poets whose full-length debuts have been disrupted by the pandemic. We're so grateful to everyone tuning in and can't wait to share this reading series with these four incredible poets with you shortly. And I'll begin by briefly introducing myself. My name is Jian Yoon, one of the co-founders and also a debut poet with the University of Nebraska Press.
And I'm the other co-founder. My name is Emma Hine, and I'm also a debut poet with Sarah Band Books. And today our featured readers are Jessica Q. Stark, Lucia LoTempio, George Abraham, and Leila Chatti. If you like what you hear, which I am so certain you will, please consider purchasing these authors' books via their publishers, an independent bookstore, or via our bookshop affiliate page, all of which are linked below. Our readers will each read for 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll have a brief conversation before wrapping up.
Okay, so without further ado, we'll move on to the reading section. It is my pleasure to introduce our first reader, Jessica Q. Stark. Jessica is a Vietnamese-American poet and scholar that lives in Durham, North Carolina. She holds a PhD in English from Duke University, and her poetry has most recently appeared or is forthcoming in Pleiades, Tupelo Quarterly, and the Glass Poetry Journal. She writes poetry reviews for Carolina Quarterly and is an assistant poetry editor for Agni. She is the author of 3 chapbooks, and her first full-length collection, Savage Pageant, was published by Birds LLC in March 2020. About this book, Dorothea Lasky has said, part poetry book, part collection of private, personal, and public histories. This book takes you headfirst into the other world, where all you can do is swim. I'll risk it all to say that we need this book for all of time. Please join me in welcoming Jessica to the Zoom stage.
Woo! Woo! Thank you so much to both of you, and thank you for hosting this space. It's so important to keep this stuff going amidst everything. It's keeping me alive, I know that for sure. And thank you to the other readers. It's such an honor to share this virtual, strange space with all y'all. It's an honor. So I'll read from Savage Pageant, and just a little preface. This book came out in March, and it was the product of an obsession, a research hole, about this one place called Jungle Land, which housed Hollywood celebrity animals up until its closure in 1969, and it happened to have been located very close to where I grew up in Southern California. As well, I wrote it during my first pregnancy, and a lot of that bled into the concepts of thinking about spectacle, who is made a spectacle, and what and how that keeps circulating within US history. So it's a hybrid text. It has some images that I might show, but I'll jump back and forth between genealogies and the poems, and hopefully that will make some sense. Apologies for the state of my room. I'm moving, so like my door is off the hinge because there's some housework happening. So please excuse that. I feel like it's like appropriate in terms of reading poetry at this moment. 1803. Rancho El Conejo, a Spanish land grant in California, was gifted to Jose Polanco and Ignacio Rodriguez. Land grant titles were government issued, permanent, and distributed to prominent men to encourage settlement in the area. The land was mostly devoted to cattle and sheep raising. The owners of the ranchos frequently used Spanish-speaking Native American workers, many of them former mission residents, to till their newly acquired land. Native Americans reported tyrannical tendencies in rancho owners and performed purification practices on the soil and the water used for farming, washing, and drinking. They warn of eventual drought in the territories. They bear within themselves a kind of aesthetics of hidden things. Rancho boundaries compose the basis of California's land survey system, and the names of ranchos remain on the maps of the area today. 1915, President Woodrow Wilson commissions the first White House film screening of The Birth of a Nation. It is filmed on the property of what would later be named Jungle Land. It would be frequently used as a recruitment tool for the Ku Klux Klan. And this poem is called The First White House Screening. Like writing history with lightning, all sharp corners and dead, Jungle Land bleaches its teeth for its first high house silver screening. President Woodrow Wilson smiles, recognizes the oak trees mistaken for Southern Reserve, a litmus test for a better view, a cleaner plot, a place to call one's own only. Under President Wilson, a photograph became required for all new federal job applicants, the Navy, the Treasury, but most importantly, the Postmaster General, where shortly after election, ghosts began floating behind screens. An elegant solution. The details of a look for a tidier exchange, a salve for the face-to-face and the averted eye. Your finest term accomplishment. A population of alternatives working hard underground. The dead letter office is to the left, down the hall. Blank forms tucked away from public view, an envelope carrying the rust of bright machinery away from the tongue. Not dead, no trace. No one here by that name. An easy opacity for the splice, and the imagination is most active when it is scared. I grasp another letter, find your face on the highest denomination of our currency. Sort to destroy, I stamp it, but outside the reporters are already getting it all wrong. So a big part of this book, like I mentioned, was researching this archive of violence, of land ownership and US entrepreneurism, but also kind of just grappling with the terror of bringing a child into this extremely violent world. Savage Pageant, a genealogy. When we were little, my sisters, being the youngest, I too thought the pregnant form was disgusting. Nothing is as plain or crass as expecting. The awkward roundness of past sex on a body stage and all of that skin stretching. What we really wanted was combustion, to burn the deed around our own real estate. What we really wanted was inelegant. A clean break from the spectacle with gas station snacks and water when we needed. My grandmother had 11 pregnancies and an infection. My mother had 4 and wished for boys. Sometimes you can't put all the bones back where they're supposed to go. I had a boy, and they took you out with a knife. Where am I going? 1928, and this refers to Jackie, who is one of the many lions that played Leo the Lion over the decades, the MGM lion of the Hollywood movies. 1928, 5 hours into the plane ride from San Diego to New York, Jackie's plane crashes in the Arizona desert. The pilot, Martin Jensen, leaves the lion in the cage to seek help. Jackie is left with a small supply of milk, sandwiches, and water. The surrounding trees are quite straight and give the impression of standing guard over the lion's house. Martin was found 4 days later. Rescuers recover Jackie after a week's search. She is unharmed and earns the name Leo the Lucky. I should say, the house shelters daydreaming. The house protects the dreamer. The house allows one to dream in peace. Savage Pageant, 33 weeks, and I'd like to dedicate this to the panther that escaped jungle land, one of the only animals that escaped. And it would show up random places in Southern California. Like it would show up at like gas stations and like outside of convenience stores. And it would, you know, it was like periodically in the newspaper that somebody had seen the panther for about 10 years and they never recovered it. Labor, a noun. 1, productive activity, especially for the sake of economic gain. 2, the body of persons engaged in such activity, especially those working for wages. 3, this body of persons considered as a class, distinguished from management and capital. Last week, I felt your hiccups for 3 days straight. This week, unknown. A collection of impulses, this savage page. I pay to sit with a circle of strangers to feel more prepared, and one woman cries. I feel my eyes roll and I curl into another language. I am obsessed with hiding my own nakedness. The body on display, a public domain of choices made, a needle, a drink of sugar, the sun going down as I rise. Is it madness to have you? Elephants breaking the main water line. There are things I'd like to tell you before you are born. Like, don't ever sit in circles with strangers. Like, you don't always have to be in motion to survive. Like, the human heart is capable of making the head feel very small. And the last tissue I'll give you before giving you away to the clock and the stars is a simple one. Already you are part of the air, and this end will not summarize forever. Stay static for a time. Hold on to the slippery pool of hearsay, rumor, these legends. Even if they are stones, they are made of sand. And even if you can't jump ship, you might not need to find your way home. Okay, just a couple more. So the last chapter of this book is rooted, it's called The Illness, and it's rooted in parsing together the ways in which unseen and seen repercussions happen historically in response to accounts of sort of under-acknowledged violence throughout time. So these are a part of that. 1962, 3 episodes of mass hysteria or psychogenic illness occur worldwide during this year. The Tanganyika laughter epidemic, the June bug epidemic, and a fit of seizures in Welsh, Louisiana. In the laughter epidemic, 60 schoolgirls aged 12 to 18 could not stop laughing for up to 6 months. They said things were moving in their minds, ungovernable things. And I'll just read 2 more poems. Ariel. Darkness grew a little finger and led the company of men into the sea. Driven mad with the afterplaces of memory, the trace substance, the years of sleep roused by the crack. There was nowhere else to go but over, they cried. There were no instructions on how best to create an illusion. So swiftly inside a storm they recall, a spirit released from prison for service was still a prisoner. The ship and its rich garments were breaking apart. And this is the final one, which is the final poem from the collection. And thank you for listening. Savage pageant, jungle land had many names, which is true. And now we are carving mythology out of unremembered time. The recurrent dream about jungle land isn't about tigers or Mabel or a roster of poorly behaving men. We know memory, like a trapped lion must snack on dry sandwiches to survive. It would be nice to leave it alone. The small lion to its sandwich. But here is the affliction from stories better left unsaid, the spectacle in the archive of harm, the body left untouched for 4 hours, of Flint and the shootings that no longer receive another name. We call 100 mouths laughing an epidemic. We call 1,000 killing bodies a circumstance. We are so far away from it all, aren't we? The plastic jungle and the crass crate. Yet here we sit like the mannequins of young schoolgirls imagining something out of thin air, our tongues curling around no nation, no sudden movements to call our own. Thank you.
Woo! Oh my gosh, that was amazing, Jessica. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow. So now it's my honor to introduce our second reader, Lucia LoTempio. Lucia is the author of Hot with the Bad Things, which was published by Alice James Books this May. Ross Gay says that this book does beautiful, crucial, and difficult work, and I couldn't agree more. Lynn Melnick calls Hot with the Bad Things a supremely smart book and one whose wisdom, humanity, and power I very much needed. You can find Lucia's poems in Passages North, The Journal, Quarterly West, in Poemaday, and elsewhere. She's also the co-author with Susanna Russ-Barr of the 2019 chapbook Undone in Scarlet. Lucia lives and writes in Pittsburgh, and we're so excited to have her here with us today. Lucia.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much to both of you for having, for putting this on and starting this project. I'm really excited to see, where it all goes, and I just want to express gratitude not only for this, but all the work that you do in other spaces as well. So thank you. And thank you so much to Jessica. That was really fabulous. And I can't wait to hear the following poets. I'm super humbled to be here. So thank you to the listeners for listening as well. I'm going to read from Hot with the Bad Things. Just like a little bit of background, I guess. It's a lyric sequence of prose poems. I think about the book as one long poem. So I'll jump around a little bit throughout the book. Just a little background on the book. It started when I started writing it when news broke that a man killed his ex-girlfriend on my college campus. And I was, really struck by the response of, the internet to this occurrence. And that's where it started. And then it evolved into being, sort of like a memoir hybrid in which I really, I'm going through or thinking about sexual violence and trauma, particularly on college campuses. But I hope that the book is more about, thinking about the ways in which we write and talk about those types of violence. I'm going to read a little bit. And like I said, I'll jump around. The man says, alone on a bus. That's how a horror movie starts. But it feels more imaginable, tomorrow rather than a screen. I should be a singed cauterization, removal to pin down this red. Hiding behind the poem is always another poem, and then that one, less blood, or a red more seeable and deserved. I don't know what I deserve anymore, and it's hard to know when everyone tells me I love myself, and I do, really. My friend got on the bus and the driver pleaded, oh honey, I'd love to see your face. She tells me this belongs in a poem, but I don't think here is what she meant. The man on TV said, violence requires no imagination. Anyone can shoot a gun. But if the end of the barrel is the furthest distance he could imagine, I'm just not sure. Listen, if nothing goes to plan, imagine it as bad as possible. I kept waking after the moment of plunge. Smell thick, warm, humid, dark. A knife to raise on the floor, a quick reach. It was after the flood of posts. The man murdered the girl and her new lover. I was just a few months gone. I posted a picture too, a sunset posing as sunrise, red hearts like playing cards, as if I can play this mirror game, as if she could light through me, as if I am at the quiet, swirling center. Here, it opens with a metal snap. It is teeth put in a swinging hand. Puncture, closeness. In any case, some blood moves in something. If telling a story is the mark of victory, what does that make me? Maybe power is like language, hard to nail down and relentless. Smiling at a man who is waving to someone behind you. When I write about the girl, I don't know a way that isn't obliteration. The heart is flexible, pure creamed flesh, if it fleshed out all its blood. As if I could touch her. And then, there are so many things a touch can be. But I laid out on campus, concrete and ash, anointed bare back. But it was the August heat thunder. But I don't want this to just be. Held me by the corners of my mouth, made me a fucked up smile, but I wanted it. But I was August heat thunder. I wanted it. I told him I wanted it. But I walked to the gas station for something to fry up. I told him I wanted that. But I wanted him to prop the door open. Small death, small shame. Photograph of a small room emptied. Portrait of women killing Orpheus, body small, in death, in pieces. I did not find pleasure in that. A small death. Do you feel shame when you are dead? Something always lives on, small. When you are dead, know this hand is yours. No one comes to claim it. Told me a rape is a small death. Something still lives. A blasphemous love for myself, and not dead or small. There is nothing triumphant about red rising, like next day. Once I sat in an atrium while a man tuned a piano. The notes were not discordant, but patiently organized into melody. My mother told me that I hate men. I loved a man and he was kind to me. That was not a mistake. When I look up distraught, the examples babble on about women hysterical, screaming. Online, all these sentences with a man so distraught, he kills a woman, one he loved, one who was kind, and in her voice, or mine, a crackled throat. Okay. The mouth opens like it's just blunt entry. I want to have sex with what I want to become, says the poet. I think I should feel very broken down, very rotten, but I'm open like the hull of a ship with stairs ascending. When I see a grease fire, it's a trash fire. It's a car engine fire. It's on the belly of a great lake. I'm always looking for solution, but an equation would be too elegant. Siri says, "Thank you for your feedback," when you call her naughty girl. I know I shouldn't be filling any cup to splash. When I say grease fire, I mean nothing else. I mean grease fire. I tell my lover to throw me onto the bed and he refuses. What happens when you are hot with the bad things? When I was younger, I felt a tenderness that was uninterrupted. Now, when I feel it coming on, I think I know where it started. When I open, I need to know who, Or when my mouth opens, it's full of fire and still so hungry. Okay, I think I have time to read. I'm gonna read I'll read 3 more excerpts. But yeah, once again, thank you so much for listening. Thank you again to the Debut Revue for having me, and definitely check out my book and the other books on our publishers' websites. But I think Bookshop is this amazing thing. I don't actually know how new it is, but it's new to me. But it's an amazing thing where you can support local bookstores, and I think that's really important. Okay. A man I know posted a documentary about any campus. #rewatching. When I watched that film, I was so mad. I already knew everything they told me. Who was that for? Who are these poems for? A hashtag has an edge. Lead me out, red exit neon, when the tacit applause comes. There are so many things done to me, and I don't want to just say. My small, small self, my little warm nub. I see your dead body everywhere, flat on cement, spread eagle and pulled to a point where your paws should be. Sometimes waterlogged, and others matted mud. It's still coming. It's still happening, even when I step over you and look at the sky. A little moss on the wall, how do I tell him? Every time a man touches, it's better with the promise of worse. I love a man, how do I tell him? My mother says I don't seem happy at all. He forgets to lock the door at night. How do I tell him? A sweet mass of something big that presses. Life is amazing, I say when a friend asks. How do I tell him? I'm kneeling on a chair, wobble and sweat. Life is amazing. I repeat louder, then louder, then louder, then louder, and believe it. Another shared article. Collaged photographs that don't match. Her, her lover, her, the murderer, the house. The house, grass peeked through snow. Red garland, forgotten. 2 people bundled. From the side, they look so close together, legs in sync, like this one, a woman, and the other, a shadow. The bear on the fountain in the center of Geneseo, like a pit in a peach, like the stomach of a body. A truck hit it last winter, then another a month later, and again last week. When I go back, it won't be there. It'll be like I'm not going back at all. A silly hope, as if everything that ever happens in a place has an edge, like an aerial shot of it. That memory could be stilled, then framed, like a penned up animal. Okay, thank you.
Much, Lucia. That was an incredible reading. I feel like the line hiding behind the poem, always another poem, is gonna be in my head all night.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so our third reader, I'm so excited to introduce our third reader. All right, George Abraham. All right, George Abraham is a Palestinian-American poet from Jacksonville, Florida. They are a Kunneman Fellow, a board member of the Radius of Arab American Writers, and a recipient of the College Union Poetry Slam's Best Poet title. They are the author of the debut collection, Birthright, which was released by Button in April 2020. Naomi Shabnai has called this collection a bold, brilliant book, a love too wide for containment, political, yet passionately personal. I believe anyone who has read this collection will agree with me that it's a complete triumph. Their work has appeared in the American Poetry Review, the Paris Review, Lit Hub, and elsewhere. They are currently based in Somerville, Massachusetts, where they are a PhD candidate in bioengineering at Harvard University. The Zoom stage is all yours, George.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro. And wow, thank you, Jessica and Lucia, for that was those were wild readings. I'm actually gonna get right into it, and then I'll talk about the book a little after. I said, you killed me, and I forgot, like you, to die. Mahmoud Darwish in Jerusalem. Taking back Jerusalem. Let me be brief. By the end of this, someone will be cursed, and I pray at anyone but him. Let me start again. The night was beautiful, but not romantic. Sure, there was smoke and moonlight. From this angle, you could almost mistake this city for American. There were 7, all of us born of this country before this country existed. It was ours, the way a street cat is mothered by thin air. Still, we called this, our existing here, a reclamation, a taking back, the sign reading cameras in use outside the unlit jewelry store, the palm trees dancing like they could belong here, city of gravel throats and temples cry, city of gold blessed forehead and confluenced histories, how many waters anointed and claimed you, inheritance, how many hands unsanctuaried you by birthright and conquest, a name, however holy, can be a story of unimaginable distance. Believe it. We could only exit you by the mouth through which we entered, and there we first saw him, shadow, folded in shadow, speaking hushed and hurried Arabic, and for the first time that night, a familiar I could but couldn't have known, a boy with moonlit tongue promising his mother he'll make it back with every breath, peering around the corner, a soldier, his gun, that precise smallness. I couldn't unsee him or him, couldn't uncast that smile from his nodding face, our mouths pretty with English. He stopped one of us. He searched 1 out of 8 of us, and there I remembered my mother begging God to watch over us in Jerusalem, where at 4 years old, a soldier held a gun to her head, and maybe it wasn't or was at this exact spot, and maybe she prayed for the wrong son, but in that moment I prayed, and there was no God, but the space between us, that the distance between my holy and his holy could resurrect a broken Lord on my breath. I prayed, and there I began to understand how my mother could abandon her birthright. And sure, I guess she made it out alive, depending on your frame of reference. And so did we. And by some magic, so did that boy, caught with the wrong God on his breath, in his holy city. Forgive me. I'm trying to understand what makes one's existence at a fixed location a radical act, divine even, and what makes the existence of another near a specific body of water a violence. Forgive me. I wrote this in an American airport, and its magic escaped me. Thank you all. So that was the opening poem of Birthright. It centers a lot around my first and only trip back to my ancestral homeland of Palestine, and the kind of contradictions of being even able to access Palestinian land as a Palestinian in diaspora, because that is something that most of us do not get the chance to access. And I guess like today is a particularly, I know this is going to be streamed later, but it's a particularly, I guess, sensitive moment given the death of Ahmed Arakat at a checkpoint in the West Bank. And by death, I mean murder. And by murder, I mean he was shot on the way to his sister's wedding for having like a car malfunction issue at a checkpoint, and they immediately thought he was a threat and opened fire and left him on the street bleeding for an hour and a half while medics came and were denied access to him. And there are already going to be news stories spinning this about like, oh, self-defense, blah, blah, blah. If you look at that and call that anything but state-sanctioned murder, I don't know what to tell you about yourself. I don't know what else that says about your humanity and how you view Palestinian humanity or lack thereof. So I'm gonna actually read a section from a sonnet crown that's at the center of the manuscript. I don't usually read this out loud very much. I mean, particularly, it's a long poem. It's a full sonnet crown. But it's a difficult poem in a lot of ways. So I think this is an appropriate moment to read it. This will be just a few excerpts from it. Thank you all so much. Cartographies of Light. 2. Brief histories of fire. To resurrect us in flames, make holy the fire who refuses to burn and unname our geographies. Call city a settlement and watch that language char a home and syllable in one brief flash wound. Because we have tasted its ash, death is a door we refuse to walk through. We erect empty tombs to name it contradiction. We build these and every heaven because we are greedy to conquer eternity, because we've watched our own dissolve and slip through our grasp. We landlust, we pray to countries beyond our reach, because Jaffa is beautiful, it can't be ours. The coastline begging a crystal tithe behind glass, a gentrified Hamsa cries and leaks moonlight. The air heavies its timber beams as tendrils unravel beneath that humid. Here, an unfamiliar song fades into carved stone. Here, a street cat disappears into an endless alley and forgets its own reflection. In no country, the not fruit untranslates its blood shed into the bodiless lyric, that music without instruments. Somewhere, an unplucked lyre births a choir of golden angels from air. Somewhere, a poem demands nothing to make a song of. Instead, the poem demands outline. Instead of an outline, the corpse demands reliquaries and fills them. 2, instead of each endlessly bodied night, may our every stolen town unghost. Instead of the net of kitchen scraps dangling above your head, it was the neighboring street's silence that sang of decay. In Khalil, Arabic heavies the street as settlers from their heaven bombard the Arabic with newspaper, leftovers, sometimes acid, undissolved. The Hebrew graffiti reads, "Kill the Arabs," bold in white against dark stone. The ghost outline of free, blank, bleached to its left. In this country, everything demands to be unwritten. 3. The apartheid wall writes your suicide note, a cento composed of graffiti from the Israeli apartheid wall. In my previous life, I was human. With faith, I made a labyrinth of myself and burned. Forever, I remained in existence, God of eyes unopened, no consciousness, just existence without. They told us to exist is to resist. The Palestinian spirit is stronger than any country. You must riot to be heard. A lie, I cannot live. The truth being, we are all waiting for death. Hope is a territory I am ashamed to live in. How soon do we forget to open hearts at all costs? The hands that build can also tear through death and discover ashes of self. Beauty, a mirror where senseless objects fail to reflect. Cut away the poisoned yesterdays. A country is not only what it does, but what it tolerates. I am ashamed to live in a world that built me. If there is to be a heaven, let it be the country I return to. Stone of hope in a mighty stream of ash and tears, Jesus wept for Jerusalem. Let me fall into those incomplete and familiar waters. I was better there. 4. Sunlight speaks to the children of exile. breathless and stellar, we are damned to cyclic and inherited implosion because we were nothing less than heavenly beings, swallowed by ceaseless night. Yes, there are days you'll curse the universe, this peculiar gravity. How we chase ourselves up ceaselessly from another oblivion as if our organs weren't drifting continents, as if we loved our bodies in a way we can never love a country, the invisible hues of ourselves leaking onto galaxy the way paint graffitis an apartheid wall or bullet makes epitaph of an already forgotten saint whom you begat the heavens of, in wake because you have quaked in its shadow. Let this not be song of winter, its cold embrace like that of gun, a black hole's ceaseless entropy. Let this not be a metaphor for bleeding sun or falsetto wisps peeking over horizon. Let it sing to every land, unearthed and unearthed, troubled yet fallow, into that land, unearthed, troubled, yet fallow, I sing praise to your rewritten and eroded topography. To hands that plow and seed a forgotten history, I sing praise to your calloused and unwounded exterior. To soil that cradles everything, even in betrayal, I sing praise to the weight you swallow and inhabit. I know somewhere the land sings love to its people the way street cats howl to moonlight in lonesome gaze. Somewhere I kiss the Mediterranean and no one drowns at the intersection of salt and fury. Somewhere a patient God holds the universe with our tiny bodies ravaging in his arms. Somewhere our children wake up and become music, like Debke was just another word for morning prayer, and Debke was not another word for mourning. How even in death our people are always waking music, are always guttural melody, thickening the air's hot empty, are always trespassers who dance on holy land, wine before water emptied and transfigured us into backwards miracle, ungodly magic, deity of backfired apocalypse. We tore down the earth and called it ceremony. So today I call us counterpoint, God swallowers, dissonance without sacrament, choir of unholy amnesia. We believe in earth's end because we survived it, children of waking damned, of graceless falsetto. What was our bones that split their fracturing hands, of second son, of rising Philistine and refusing collision. We resurrect ourselves from God's lungs and burn and sing again. Thank you all.
Wow.
Oh, George, that was transcendent. I'm so glad that you decided to read from that sonnet crown. Thank you so much. So I'm finally thrilled to introduce the fourth and final reader of our inaugural debut review reading, Leila Chatti. Leila is a Tunisian-American poet and author of Deluge, which was published by Copper Canyon Press this April. In the New York Times earlier this year, Naomi Shihab-Nye said of this book, "To write a series of poems out of extreme illness is a bracing accomplishment indeed." And she's right, it truly is a beautiful book. Leila is also the author of the chapbooks Ebb from Akashic Books and Tunsia Amrakia, the 2017 editor selection from Bull City Press. She has received grants and fellowships from the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund, the Helene Wurlitzer Foundation, the Fine Arts Works Center in Provincetown, and the Wisconsin Institute for Creative Writing, among others. Her poems appear in the New York Times Magazine, Plowshares, Tin House, American Poetry Review, and elsewhere. And she's currently pursuing a PhD in creative writing at the University of Cincinnati. And we are honored to have her reading with us today.
Woo! I'm really happy to be here. I'm sort of like stunned having listened to those. I feel very honored to have been able to sort of sit and absorb. That was beautiful. And thank you both for organizing this. This is, in a very kind of lonely time. This is such a special thing to come together, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you. So I'm gonna I usually just sort of read straight through. not through the entire book, obviously, but I guess just as a little, it looks like this. And it's about a period of my life where I was very sick in my early 20s, and trying to understand that sickness, and then also all the layers that made me grieve it, I guess. And so I'm going to start off with the first poem. And there's an epigraph from when Mary is giving birth to Jesus in the Quran. And when I was sick, I returned to scripture, which is why this book has a lot to do with faith. And I was very startled by this passage in which she's in the desert and she says, "Oh, I wish I had died before this and was in oblivion, forgotten." Confession. Truth be told, I like Mary a little better when I imagine her like this, crouched and cursing, a boy god pushing on her cervix. I like remembering she had a cervix, her body ordinary and so like mine. Girl sweat lacing rivulets like veins in the sand, her small hands on her knees, not doves, but hands, gripping, a palm pressed to her spine, fronds whispering like voyeurs overhead. Oh, Mary, like a god, I too take pleasure in knowing you were not all holy, that ache could undo you like a knot. And suffering, I admire this girl who cared for a moment, not about God or his plans, but her own distinct life. This fiercer Mary who'd disappear if it saved her, who'd howl to hell with salvation if it meant this pain. The blessed adolescent who squatted indignant in a desert, bearing his child like a secret she never wanted to hear. So I kind of want to read some things I haven't read a lot of. Read this. Annunciation. At the bedside, robed in white, a white blaze, above a hum of light like a supernal language, a dove in the dark bell of my threshold, pain peeling like a Sunday, the attending announcing shadow, widening the dove's steely beak, a bit of pressure, a sharp pinch in view on the screen, apparitions, black halos, black seas void of boats or divinity. They are speaking now, they are trying their best to appear human, so I won't startle, leave, but what they have to tell me, I don't want to receive the word only incarnate once it slipped in her sleeve. Sarcoma. When the doctor says the word sarcoma, I consider how it might be a nice name for a daughter, that good feminine A, the way parents name their children for all sorts of inappropriate things. Apples, for instance, or the place where the baby was conceived. And I trace my fingers over the barrow of my belly as he speaks, flesh distended beneath the blue tissue I wear for a dress, an ideal grief frock, throwaway. And he says something about life expectancy, but of course I expect my life. So plain I thought nothing would ever take it. And while he explains, I cup my palms around my center, as if comforting a child, or covering her ears. Litany while reading scripture in the gynecologic oncology waiting room. And God said, let there be blood. And God said flood. And God said, good is a woman with fruit in her womb and not in her hand. And God said, sin. And God did not say, forgive. And God said, I will make a stormy wind. And God said, sun, a breath stirring. And God said, highly favored. And God said, condemned. And God said, I will blot out man whom I have created, for I am sorry that I have made them. And God said, listen, and sank a boy in her like a stone. Angel. After a month of asking, suddenly a voice. It says, you deserve that which has happened to you. It says, I see what you do with your long, green hands. Wandering through the banalities of my life, it follows, speaking, as if from a frosty bag of peas in the freezer aisle, speaking, while I'm on my knees, scrubbing the bathroom floor, trying to love a man. Its speech is disquieting company, but company nonetheless. The TV left on and turned low. It desperately wants my attention, but is polite, which is its defining weakness. Sometimes I catch it stirring out of the corner of my eye, a glint at the end of my cat's whiskers, a spangle on the ceiling of indiscernible source. More often, though, it looks like me, only a little off, like my reflection in the pregnant belly of a spoon. In fact, when I speak to it, I use my own name. I'm not sure if it minds. It repeats instead its refrain. It says, God has plans for you. It says, I didn't say they were good. "14 Sunday school, 3 days late. I'm not stupid. I know how it works. But there was a time when she was just some virgin nobody, too, small purse of her womb and her ordinary eggs, waiting, like loose squirrels. Etiology. They said it. You will bring upon your father, you will bring upon your family. I was 13, I was in love. When with him, I felt so much. When he said I could hurt you so easily, I said, good, I deserved it. I didn't know how to stop. I knew followed me like a strange dog into the house, but I loved love that wasn't obligatory. I wanted to be sure someone could. I was filled, I was less. I sang genie in a bottle. I moved my hips. I wore my skin where everyone could see it. Hymen. Second blood. I never knew you. After the first, scoured the bed for your blazoned blot and came up empty. Perhaps I was born without you. A box with no prize inside, a sundae with no cherry on top. God of good girls, God of matrimony, mother state which I consider a distant country with a discordant tongue, did you speak with God and conclude I hadn't use for you? Once I was small as your kin, so small and for such a long time. Longer than I've lived, I fit inside my mother when she fit inside her mother, and so on and so forth, and further. A nest of matrons, knees and a beam in which to be female is to be something like infinity, and was it determined then what kind of woman I would be? It seems I've always been frightened, little veil, of wedlock's lock clicking shut. The heritable procession of women whispering in the aisle of my pulse, don't do, don't do, don't. And I haven't done. This, the graveman, the grave I've dug with the spade of pleasure. But wanting, seal of want, I did want it, did choose to commit my life's greatest transgression with a benevolent accomplice, and so in the herebefore, you could say I'm among the spared. What a messlessness of you could have been in any number of lives my size, billowing specters of dresses on a line of possibility, lives in which I am the bridesmaid and you, maidenhead, the bride given away, where I am the acquired property and you the red ribbon severed in the threshold, I the purse and you the coin tendered. Perhaps no one ever told you, precious emblem of innocence, simulacrum for honor, that some believe you the most important part of me, vital, like a heart a man gets the thrill of bursting where he can see it, that blood is owed to him. And that's the heart of it, isn't it? Of a woman, you, the only blood worth anything. Testimony. There is a God and there is no God but him. He has many names and answers to none. On the day of judgment, I will be called by my name and by the name of my Father. My name, the dark I was forged in, dark which rehearses its return while I sleep. Indeed, one day I will return to God as it is to him that I belong. Indeed, this was part of the message, and the message was received. I do not speak for God, and he does not speak to me. This is an arrangement, estrangement. When asked my religion, I answer, surrender. I pray with my head to the floor, with my hands where he can see them, with both eyes closed. All this for paradise, which lies at the feet of mothers. Beneath my feet, the temporal earth, which darkens where I stand. Okay. Odalisque. Polaroid taken one day before the surgery. Look, I said, that is the point. Or I said nothing. My lips, ornamental. Or my eyes spoke, or as good as spoke, agape as two black maws entering the conversation. This is clear. My eyes looking to ensure you are looking. Focus, I am subject, supine in a bed of white linens, pillows. I am framed within the frame by a window so white the world is effaced. Yet I remain, I am limned by its absence, and here you are with me looking. You want the particulars? I deny you the particulars. The scene lacking distraction concedes me inordinate importance. This is how I see myself and how I wish to be seen. But my body has its own demands. Does it silence or enliven your desire, the reminder I will one day die? This is the question my body asks. And I think I'm going to just read t-shirt. Questions directed toward the idea of Mary. Was it the voice you feared, or its shadow? Did you long for his touch, or was suffering enough for you to know he was there? Do you resent me, my juvenile hungers? Do you wish for me the freedom of a vast, barren plain? What would you have done with your body if your body obliged? Did it please you? Your sun risen at the end, like a question? Do you pity the angels, their ancillary lives? Did your worship falter once you were sure you were good? How long did you live before yielding to your inevitable shame? And how long before you realized, did you realize, shame was a blade you turned against yourself, and once you knew it, you could use it. Exegesis. I bled. God didn't want to hear about it. He said unclean, and so it was. He said it is harm, and so it was. Want to hear about it? He said unclean. Once a woman wanted, so he did her harm. And so it was first conceived, a woman suffering because a woman wanted. So he said cursed, and then he said blessed. The woman chose to suffer, conceived a God, though she never knew a man. And God knows best. If he calls a curse a blessing, then so it is. And he said she was clean. She never knew a man. I've known men, but never a God that bled and lived. But I did. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, that last line of that final poem. I've never known a man who's bled and lived, but I did. Incredible. Gosh, thank you so much, everybody, for your incredible readings. I mean, if you saw me looking down a lot, it's because I write little notes to myself of lines that stuck out to me, and throughout all of your readings, I was just like taking all these notes because it was beautiful. I feel so fortunate. We both feel so fortunate to have had you for our inaugural event. And thank you, of course, for your time, your presence, of course, your incredible poems. So we have a little bit of time set aside for a short conversational Q&A section about the debut experience, especially right now. And I thought for our first inaugural event, we might start the Q&A with a question about joy and celebration. So I know that all of you have had your books come out like right around or after lockdown. I think, Jessica, your book came out like in March, right? Like right when it was happening. So I know all of you have had to postpone or cancel your tours, your launches, but I hope you still got to celebrate them. And I would love to hear about how you celebrated the release of your book. Anybody's
I can go. I don't mind going first. Yeah, it's been really weird. But I will say, like, definitely the silver lining is having a book launch on Zoom. So many more people were able to make it than would have otherwise. Like, especially my family was able to come, which was like really fabulous. Especially because I live far away. And having friends and like former teachers and everyone who you like wish could be at events like that, being able to attend like that was really fabulous and really joyous for me. Yeah.
Definitely. I feel similarly that all my loved ones are scattered all over the place, some of them overseas. And so this was a very special, like at first, I'm very honest, I was very upset when I realized sort of everything was going to be postponed, because I do love joy, I love celebration. And I thought, like, how am I going to do this? But then once I sort of had to think about, okay, well, scrap everything, like let's start over fresh. What are we going to do? The realization that I could bring anyone because we're all in the same place, we're all virtual. That was when I had the idea to join up with all of my former teachers, and that was really, I can't imagine it like that now. That's the only way I could have imagined my launch. So being able to sort of turn this experience of well, we're all not together, but we're all together online, into something that was a strength. It was great. And I love that I have it on video forever, so it'll be something that I get to keep forever. And I did have a little book cake, so I did end up, getting a little cake with my book cover, which I'd always wanted to do. So, eating a cake, by yourself is an interesting experience, but I recommend it. So
I think that is a classic pandemic experience.
Just eating my own book cake, like, okay.
I guess retweet what was said before. It kind of all surprised me, the online virtual presence, especially so me and Sahar Mustafa, friend and Palestinian author in my community, actually had the same exact release day of 4/7, and so we just partnered and did like one single live stream together as a little launch. And like the Center for Arab Culture here in Somerville, Massachusetts, they were gonna have my book launch like in real life, but then what happened was they ended up just like really boosting the launch live stream and stuff, so it still kind of like went out to folks. And then their director like called me on the phone and was like, no, we're gonna have like a real launch for you at the end of it, don't worry, like we're gonna have the cake with Birthright on it and everything. We're gonna do all of that, like, so she's like, this is just temporary. Then I said pretty much, at the end of this I'll just be a celebrating post-quarantine event. It was actually funny though, before all that, I was lucky enough to get my author copies back in February. And I had this little instinct in my head. I was just popped up in my head one day, like the day that I got the notification that the books were at my house. I was just like, why don't I like invite just like a few really close friends, just like, a handful of folks here. And we just come over and do a silly unboxing video and like, you know, just eat cake and just drink wine and just, you know, hang out and stuff. I made an on-the-call decision where I just texted a few close friends and I'm like, hey, come over tonight. Like the books are here. And so I'm actually really glad I did that. I think it ended up, I don't know, some subconscious, like I didn't know that the quarantine was even happening at that point, but before it happened, I had like a little mini, just close thing with like a handful of friends. So.
Well, I'm so glad you had like a moment to do that before everything happened.
Yeah, for me, it's like, I don't know, the past 3 months have been so interesting because, I mean, I also finished this PhD at Duke, which took me almost 7 years to do. And then they're like, do you want to be a part of a virtual graduation? I'm like, no, absolutely not. So there's, you know, it's shifted expectations, and to build off of, you know, what y'all have said, it is nice that, you know, to be able to have the opportunity to connect to people that aren't, you know, regionally close. And I think the first virtual reading, or one of the first, was with Eric Tran, who has an amazing debut out as well. And then my partner's like parents like let me know afterwards that I was like, they had me like at the dinner table and they were like eating while listening. I'm really glad I didn't know that was happening. Really. But whatever, it's just, I welcome the strange new forms of engagement. But I mean, to be real though, I think either, you know, launch or no launch, there's a bit of like, at least for me, I felt like a little bit of like melancholy, like after it came out or something. And I don't know, I feel like it was an opportunity to sort of like not like press that all the way down, you know, with like events or so for me, I kind of, well, I don't know, I kind of sat with that a little bit, and I think I'm still sitting with it. But it was just, it felt kind of like honest, you know, like I made this thing, and it was incredibly important to me. And maybe there's not, you know, a lot of glitz and glamour with it. Maybe it's just, I made it and that's it.
I think there's like an unspoken like grief that comes to like the loss of a project, and like letting go of something that's exciting, but it's also like, and that's it.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
I think it was Aria Aber who tweeted like last year, but like publishing a book is the most underwhelming thing I've ever done.
No.
Out of like, I couldn't help but feel a little bit of that and like the post-release grief, and also the delay between like, oh, it's technically out in the world, and then people are gonna react to it later, and people are gonna like read it, and like I've gotten messages, etc. But there's a weird delay there between like the release date and then the like affirmation that like, no, people are like, it's getting and stuff, which has been odd.
It's hard to remember that people don't like immediately like, okay, it came out and then in a moment, like 10 seconds, they read the book and all went to tweet about it to me, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So kind of moving off of that question about joy into one partially about joy and partially about craft. We often hear poets talk about moments of genesis for a full book, but we'd love to hear about moments of discovery during the writing process. Were there any turns or discoveries you made while wading through the book that turned out to be pivotal?
A fantastic question.
For me, when I was writing, I had been writing the sort of, you know, the pregnancy poems on the side. And I was also just so feverishly kind of like writing against this imaginary clock, because like when at least when I was pregnant, I felt like everybody was like, oh, you gotta like you know, you gotta get all the stuff done, because like it almost felt like you were gonna die or something, you know, like you just like wouldn't be able to write, you wouldn't be able to do anything, which is totally you know, false. But I was scared, you know, and I was writing against the clock, and then it like thinking of them in such different domiciles within my poetry, and then it kind of just dawned on me in terms of I was teaching a class and I was becoming very pregnant, and I had one student that took 2 classes for me back to back, and it was this like male, like for lack of a better word, bro student who was very lovely, but like would kind of like comment on the size of me over time. And so I just like felt like I was becoming more and more of a spectacle in front of this very sweet student, well-meaning student. And then so for me, the genesis was like really fusing those 2 worlds together and thinking about how can I contain, you know, this personal experience within this other world of obsession, of spectacle, and hold them together.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I think I had a moment, like maybe mid-writing, where kind of similarly I was like sort of rejecting maybe writing about a particular topic, like in my case, writing more about like the personal and thinking more in like hybrid terms about like what poetry can be. And that I think was like really pivotal for the book, because it started as like something sort of at arm's length and maybe cloaked in like surrealness and image, and some of that still stands, but most of it now does feel very personal. And that was never something I really, I don't know, thought I could do in a poem. And like writing the book, like it was pivotal for the book, and it was also pivotal for my like own understanding of you know, how I write and why I write. So that was like really exciting, I guess. Yeah.
I was on an airplane to AWP, and I sat next to Ross White, who ended up becoming my chapbook editor at Bull City, but at that time was not my chapbook editor. And
Oh,
Ross is so great.
very sweet.
And he'd asked me if I had been working on anything, and I had said I'd just shown what I thought was going to be a chapbook, and then my mentor Dorian corrected me and said that was not a chapbook, it was going to be my book, and it was terrifying. And so that had been like a day or 2 earlier, because I was living with her in North Carolina. And so I on the plane, when Ross asked me was I working on anything, I said, yeah, I think I maybe am starting a book, and showed him like, you know, the first 15 poems or so that had been, you know, at the center of this project. And he looked through it and he said, yeah, he's like, you know, I can see, you know, there's faith and there's medicine. He's like, but there's something else and you haven't figured it out yet. And I knew, because I absolutely thought of my book as being like, okay, faith and medicine. That's what I see. And that was 2 years before I'd finished the book, and so like very much in the beginning. And I kept writing, and kind of that was in the back of my mind the whole time. And it wasn't until I got to Wisconsin that it sort of hit me really suddenly that what I wasn't talking about was shame, that it was sort of this constant in all these poems, but that I hadn't actually named shame. And then I hadn't, because I hadn't named it, I hadn't interrogated why was it that I felt I was punished, and why was it that these were the reactions I had. And once I realized, you know, it was like I knew I felt punished, but I had never questioned why. And so once I started unpacking, then there was this, and then there was this, and there was this. And that was a major turning point for me. And that's there's a long kind of sequence poem called Ora and in the book at the end. And that sort of came from all these writings that it was not just me sort of figuring out on a, like, you know, a crafty for the reader level, but really figuring out for myself some things that I had lived my whole life not knowing about shame for myself. Yeah.
I think that for me, like some pivotal moments in the book, like became apparent really towards the end of the process. I think that classical advice that a lot of people give, that you have to overwrite the book to have a book, like was really true for me. And it was like really fascinating because the first few years of putting Birthright together, I knew that after my trip to Palestine, I knew that I wanted to write something about it. The book got its title when I was hanging out with Marwa Hilal and Jess Rizkallah, two very good friends of mine in New York. And they were just like, oh my God, you know what would piss the Birthright bros off? If you just like wrote a book called Birthright. It was your Palestine book, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, I'm just like, I know this is a meme right now, but like this is like the actual, like, I'm telling y'all this is gonna happen. And then a few years later I call Marwa, and she's the first person I tell that I got the acceptance. I'm just like, you have to write a forward for it now. And she's like, yep, done. And but I think that it was so fascinating because what ended up happening with Birthright is the book I initially envisioned it being which is like, not to like throw shade at myself, like the Diaspora TM poetry book. That ended up being like some parts of the first two sections of the book. So for folks who don't have the book, it's a 3-section book. It's like a triptych. And the first 2 parts are very much like, yeah, my upbringing in Florida, existing in the South as a queer Palestinian person, then going to Palestine in the second part. And then the third part is almost like a critique of the entire construct of the first 2. And the third part is kind of the like, okay, so like, what are the like contradictions and erasures of certain constructs of diaspora poetry when we're talking about Palestine specifically? It was the more and more I leaned into the book, the more I realized, oh wow, that's the heart of the book actually. The heart of the book is that contradiction, and like and which isn't to say like I'm like tearing my own book down, but more of just like that's just how it had to exist for this speaker. And that's just how it had to exist for these intersections of histories, I think. And yeah, so it's very palinodic in like its logic, and every decision on that road made me more and more and more uncomfortable. So I think I was doing something right because of that, and had great folks behind me helping, of course.
I mean, it was an incredible book. I mean, all of your books were just, you know,
Together.
yeah, they're right over here. All of them were just incredible. And I thought maybe we could go ahead and move on to the last question, which is a very brief one. What forthcoming poetry debut are you most looking forward to in 2020 that you would recommend to our viewers?
Or recent.
Mm-hmm. Or recent, yeah, recent or forthcoming.
There's so many good ones coming out.
I know.
Have y'all read DMZ Colony?
DMZ Colony.
Oh my gosh, so good.
It's Donmi Choi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a hybrid. It's yeah, it's just beautiful. Just in terms of thinking about diaspora, historical violence, and holding that all in this container that's accounting for archive, slippage, repurposing language. It's voluminous, beautiful. Yeah.
Philip Matthews had his book Witch come out the same day as my book on Alice James, and that book is so mysterious to me and delightful. And I had the pleasure of being with Philip at Provincetown when he was working on that book, so I heard early versions of some of those poems and some of that book, and it continues to like you know, like every time I'm reading it and thinking about these poems, I'm learning something new. So that's a book that I'm excited about because I've never really read anything quite like it. But I'm also really excited for Benjamin Garcia's Thrown in the Throat. Very, very excited. Milkweed. I think September, August, something like that. It's coming up. Yeah.
I will say I'm very lucky. I got a sneak peek at Jessica Abugatas' Strip, which is forthcoming.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm really excited.
Received Arkansas Press. It's the winner of the Etel Adnan Prize. And I mean, yeah, I have the galley, and I'm just like, it slaps. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, I've been like telling people that they aren't ready for it, then I got it, and I'm just like, I wasn't ready for it. Yeah, it's incredible. It's doing really like just fascinating work. And also like as a follow up to Zaina Al-Sous's A Theory of Birds.
I love Zaina.
She's my whole heart. Yeah.
Yeah, she's from Durham, so she's no longer here, but she's amazing.
No, all the books in the Etel Adnan series are just incredible. So yeah, I just cannot recommend those two enough, honestly.
I think, one that I've already read is Jaw by Albert Abonado. And I just thought it was really fabulous and like a long time coming in a lot of ways. I mean, perhaps I'm biased because he's like a long friend, but I thought it was really, really good and just sort of like a breath of fresh air. Maybe just in comparison to other things I had been reading at the time. And then something I'm looking forward to that I like don't really know much about, I've just read their work previously, is Inheritance by Taylor Johnson, which is, I think is also coming out from Alice James. And I'm just really excited for it. And I think it's going to be really good.
Awesome. So
sorry, I have to give two more. I'm sorry. One, I have to rep my pressmate Jameson Fitzpatrick.
Yes, so good.
Oh my god, I just finished Tricks in the Tapestry, and it's
so
like,
good.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so freaking good. And
I was really sitting here thinking I wanted to add that, so I'm so glad that you said that.
It's brilliant. He's brilliant. And then I also have to rep my gal Hannah Vanderhart, who was having her book come out, but I think they've delayed it from Bull City Press, called What Pecan Light, and it's gonna burn it down. It's awesome. Yeah,
amazing.
I had to put him out there.
No, we're so glad.
I feel like I have my reading list now. Yes.
Really increased horsepower. I'm really excited about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's University of Pittsburgh Press, right?
Yeah.
It was the third one I was gonna add, honestly.
So many good books. This is a good year for books. It's like,
It is.
about the corona, but we really have some good books, at least when we're here, in quarantine.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I think we're at time, so we're going to wrap up. I just wanted to say thank you all again so much. It's been a pleasure and an honor to hear from all four of you tonight. And for everyone out there watching, we hope you'll consider buying their books and spreading the word on social media. And we also wanted to add that we are accepting donations to help us cover our website hosting and Zoom account, and most importantly, to help us to continue to pay our readers. Please, of course, prioritize buying a book and donating to the many vital causes around COVID and Black Lives Matter. But if you're able to donate to Debut Revue as well, you'll find our donate link listed below.
And of course, stay tuned to our Twitter for further announcements about next month's reading. And if you enjoyed what you heard, please, once again, consider purchasing or requesting our readers' books at your local library. I promise you won't regret it. They're amazing. And thank you again, everyone. One final round of applause for Jessica, Lucia, George, and Leila. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.
All right.